let's kind of start with the conversation, what we're all here to talk about today. So I'll introduce everybody now and just do a bit of a warm welcome. My name's Ian Tyler. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Talent International, and I'll be your host for what will be probably about the next 45 to 50 minutes discussion around employee engagement, and more importantly, a discussion about how you actually get buy-in from the C-suite and why it actually matters at the executive level. I'm actually joined by an esteemed panel, which I'll introduce to you. So we're joined today by Jen Mumford, who is the Chief of Staff to the Chief HR Officer over at Zip Money, an ASX-listed fintech. Jen joins Zip with a very phenomenal background, actually, when you consider the organisation that Jen has been involved with building in terms of people and culture functions, from both Data Republic as well as safety culture prior to joining Zip. So Jen's got a wealth of information about why employee engagement matters, why it's important to the senior executive. I'm going to move on and introduce Alan. Obviously, both Alan and I are the two males on the right-hand side, if you're looking at us. Alan joins us as a senior manager and consultant from Gallup, who's got a significant amount of leadership and development experience. Actually named Sydney Morning Herald's one of the country's top 4 workplace engagement experts. So to say that we've got some good pedigree on the call, I think is second to none, and something that we're very proud of our association with Gallup as well, with the recent wins and the awards that we've had as partnering with Gallup. So we're very proud of that. Alan's experience really spans working with senior leaders and boards around employee engagement and looking at leadership development, succession and talent development as well. So again, phenomenal, and very, very happy to have you join us. And we've also got April Marco, who is our head of people and culture at Talent. Very much a hands-on, tip of the spear type leader as it relates to HR systems, culture and performance, and has got a lot of experience over the last 20 years of looking at how enabling organisations to get the best out of their people. And when you think about Talent International, we're a human endeavour business. We don't have a product. We are all about people. And that's really where April's focus is in terms of driving that kind of people and culture experience within our business. What we're here to talk about today is essentially a conversation about employee engagement, the stuff that you should know, but actually why it matters. So I'm actually just going to open up in terms of that conversation from a very warm welcome from me to both Jen, April and Alan. And really just kind of introduce those guys, to really invite them to explore this kind of first opening statement, really, which is, why does engagement need to be part of any business strategy? It sounds like a bit of a no-brainer, but unfortunately, many businesses and many industries and different sectors, they don't necessarily look at engagement as one of those kind of core pillars as businesses grow and scale. So I'd just like to kind of open that to our panel and have a conversation about this particular piece. And maybe, April, I'll pick on you first, if I may, and just talk about, why does engagement need to be part of the business strategy? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's it's almost a twofold question, really. Why does engagement need to be part of the strategy, and then why is it the business strategy that it actually needs to be part of? So, without wanting to tell everybody something that they already know, fundamentally, engagement is absolutely critical to performance of a business. Our people, as Ian said, particularly at Talent, in all organisations, so let's face it, our people are the people that are actually driving the business outcomes. They are the ones that are doing the sales or doing the consulting or doing the cleaning or doing anything it is that you're doing in a business. If you are engaged, which means you are happy satisfied, love coming to work, have good relationships with your managers and with your colleagues, and want to actually be there, then you are more likely to be.
Excellent. Wi-Fi let us down at exactly the right moment in time that we needed. But I'm sure that if we hand straight off to Jen or Alan, you can fill in the blank that April was just about to leave us with.
Yeah, Alan, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
You go first, Jen.
Well, I mean, at the core of everything, it's about people. And pretty much the reason why people and culture teams exist is to actually ensure that your people strategy maps to your business strategy. And a big part of being able to deliver on your people strategy is actually having humans that are doing the best work of their life. And one of the best ways to do that is through engaging them. And there's lots and lots of different tactics and data points that I'm sure Alan will be able to share. But engagement is your how you actually motivate your people to deliver on that people strategy, which then maps to the business strategy, which essentially should be your people team's why.
I wouldn't mind just on that, just touching on that, which is, many businesses look at employee satisfaction over and above engagement. What's the difference?
Alan, I think you've got a great definition for this, so I'll let you start. You can do the learned one, and then I'll give the more scrappy version. Yeah,
look, the unfortunate thing about a lot of employee surveys, I describe them as employee opinion surveys. So they capture all this opinion on a whole range of interesting and important topics, but a lot of those opinions don't tell us anything about what's going to drive performance in the business. And engagement is an enabler of the strategy and ultimately the performance of the organization. So the surveys are very long. They take a long time to fill out. The average people manager gets a lot of data and they struggle to make sense of it. They say, well, exactly what do I focus on first? And unfortunately, a lot of those questions are in what I describe as the satisfaction category. Yeah. So satisfaction is things like policies and procedures. It can be, is it close to home? Is the work close to home? What's the office environment like? Has it got a table tennis table there? Is it a comfortable seating and things like that? Pay can be in the satisfaction category as well. If people are paid fairly in relation to what they think is fair and to the peer group and to the industry, then doubling someone's pay doesn't necessarily double someone's motivation or engagement for very long. And people who are engaged are more likely to give that discretionary effort. Discretionary effort can show up in many forms. It's going above and beyond. It's bringing more energy to work, being more collaborative, being more focused on solving problems, being more creative. And so engaged employees give that discretionary effort more often, which is why it's an enabler of the business strategy and enabler of performance. And so engagement really is a sense of ownership. So if you are running your own small business, then you're going to be the most engaged person in that business. You're going to care about every customer, every employee, every dollar that comes in and out. So engagement in a larger organization is about a sense of ownership. Can we get employees to have that stronger sense of ownership, which means they give that discretionary effort and it enables everything else in your business? That's different to satisfaction, which is a bit more passive. I'm happy at work. It's good. Yeah, great place to work. Pays well. Good policies. But that's not that sense of ownership. That's not that skin in the game that changes behavior that then drives business performance forward. So they're different. Engagements is really all about performance, and you can measure it by getting very particular about the things that drive performance and cut through all the noise of the larger surveys that measure all interesting things, but they don't really enable your business.
Yeah, absolutely. You were going to give us a scrappy version. Now we've got April back. We'll come back to you, April, but Jen, you were going to give us a scrappy kind of in the trenches type version of this.
Yeah, or my version of engagement is, are you doing the best work of your life? Yeah. And that doesn't mean it has to be in the most senior role, in the most complex challenge. I agree. Alan's very insightful. I'll do my best, Brittany, to match. But it's doing the best work of your life. And that is lots of different things based on lots of different people, but it's about understanding your people to know what their best work of their life actually looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome back, April.
Thank you very much, guys. It's a brand new NBN here, but
Go NBN. Yeah. So we lost you at a really interesting point. So you were about to make a really compelling point, and then you disappeared. But
yes, well, I was just, I guess I was really saying that you can't leave engagement up to the P&C team or the HR team.
Yeah,
engagement is something that needs to be owned by the business. It needs to be something that matters to the board. It needs to be something that matters to the senior management team and to every single manager and employee, for that matter, in the organisation. And so it's very important that the senior people in the organisation are conscious of the fact that this is something that needs to be paid attention to by everybody in the organisation, and it's not something, it's not a P&C or an HR strategy. It's a business strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've done as part of this conversation to help the conversation lead its way, so as the audience gets some takeaways, is that where we've got one of these questions and we've got our panelists talking, we've actually prepared just a bit of a takeaway for you all. So we'll be touching on some of these points. So as we go through, and we think about what the guys here have just been talking about, and we think about why it's important to business strategy, and we listen to Alan talk and Jen talk and April, here are some other points for the audience that you can take away and actually help to form part of your internal narrative with the groups that April's just been talking about. And we'll do this in each of these sections. One of the interesting things, and we did touch on it previously, was talking about the correlation between pay and satisfaction, and that discretionary effort. Discretionary effort, I think, is something that is massively underestimated and doesn't have much oxygen, enough oxygen to actually really see who are going above and beyond. And that's really the label that we put on it. And people that go above and beyond do it because they care and do it because they are actively engaged. Would you agree with that as a statement, team? Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I have a philosophy that it can be a huge demotivator, but it's never going to be the top motivator unless you're like a wicked enterprise sales person or something like that. But that's my philosophy around it. It's like a hygiene factor, and it becomes noise if it's not kind of at that like baseline level, but it's never going to be your top motivator.
No, indeed. And if it is, it's probably people will join for money and they'll leave for money.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, wonderful. Appreciate that. Let's move into this other question as to how does engagement actually impact the bottom line? When we think about the correlation to what we were just talking about, I'll pick on you here, Alan, because I think you've probably got data, reams and reams of data that kind of supports all of this. And we've got some real and anecdotal evidence as to where we've seen that in our own business. So talk to us about this. Let's have a conversation about how does engagement actually impact the bottom line? And therefore the audience can take that away to their executives and actually say, this is that discretionary effort.
Absolutely. We do a measurement every 2 years looking at the relationship between engagement scores that we do in our surveys with clients and performance data, and performance metrics like productivity, profitability, customer outcomes, absenteeism, safety, things like turnover. So all the things that impact the performance of the business that the leaders really care about. And what I've found over time is that we can show high engagement scores and we can show improvements in engagement, and the boards and the executive teams of the organizations go, that's great, we're on the right track. But when you're able to connect it to business outcomes and performance metrics, then that's when their eyes light up, particularly their own. So what we do across our client base every 2 years, and we've done this for more than 2 decades, by the way, is look at that relationship between high engagement in organizations and low engagement. And within those same organizations, which are, those teams are operating in pretty much the same environment, yet something's different about those teams. And what we find on average is that teams that have high engagement in organizations on average have around about 80% lower absenteeism than the least engaged teams, as one example of a metric. So you can actually, by improving engagement, can reduce absenteeism. People turn up to work more or give that discretionary effort. That's a form of it. Safety. I know that's an important metric for a lot of organizations as well. Safety is a behavioural thing. It's not just policies and procedures. So you need the right kind of mindsets to ensure safety outcomes. So on average, teams that are engaged in organisations where safety is important, they have around about 40% fewer safety incidences. So you can actually change behaviour through engagement and reduce or make your organisation safer. Profitability, productivity are about 18 to 20% higher in the most engaged teams versus the least engaged teams. Why? Three things. Engagement's how you feel at work. So when you feel differently, you behave differently. You give that discretionary effort. You don't walk past something that's not working. You call out poor behaviour. You have a good idea. You promote that idea to your colleagues. So that's, again, discretionary effort. So it's the feeling first, the behaviour, the discretionary effort second. And when you get a critical mass of your employees actually behaving differently and giving that discretionary effort, you see a shift in performance outcomes. So it's quite a simple chain of events that happens. But yeah, we do this published meta-analysis every 2 years. We show it to clients and they go, this is fantastic. When you show their own data, that's when their eyes light up typically. We can quantify the value of improving engagement in their organisation. And it's often millions of dollars in organisations just from a couple of those key metrics like turnover. How much does it cost an organisation when they lose a key person? Can you retain those good people?
Absolutely. There's some interesting, and Jen's very efficient with this and just responded to some things that have come up in the feed here, actually. There's some really interesting points. Jen has just responded to a question around, is there measurement on psychological safety? Jen, do you want to just kind of more broadly unpack that?
Yeah, so I guess the context that I've just provided there, or where psych safety kind of came from as a concept, was a really big piece of work that was actually led by Google around what makes the most effective team. And they found that the top ingredient to really high performing teams was this definition of psychological safety. And their definition was, can we take risks on this team without feeling insecure or embarrassed? There's also a number of other things: dependability, structure and clarity, meaning of work and impact of work, a lot of which Alan touched on as well. But that concept of having that safe space for their team to innovate, bring different points of view, and hopefully then that leads to them doing their best work, which then has great business outcomes in terms of high performing teams hitting goals, and then delivering value for customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and delivering value for customers, reducing customer churn through engaged teams has a direct correlation to improvement of bottom line, of course. April, is there anything you would like to kind of talk about as it relates to this? And I'm really conscious that what we'll do with some of this stuff that I'm marking in the chat, we'll come back to at the end where we've got a Q&A just to kind of keep it flowing as well. So please keep that going, guys. It's there's some really good stuff in the chat there that we'll tag.
There's some, I guess I'm looking at the questions in the chat, and some of them are very much worth responding to. We just saw a question saying, what are the 3 things that we should do if we want to improve engagement? And it's a great one. I wish, or maybe Alan has, the Gallup 3 things, but I think that is it's a really nice place to start in terms of, okay, if we know engagement does impact the bottom line, how can we, what can we do next? I personally believe that step 1 then is to listen. Okay, so we need to actually, as HR people, we tend to think that we need to have the answers. We don't have to have the answers. We have to ask the people what the answer is, and then we have to actually act on that. And so if we can listen to the people and find out from them what they need more of or less of, or what's working for them or what's not working for them, or we could use the Gallup Q12 as another very good example. But ultimately, if we actually listen to them, and then step 2 is we actually have to act. So there's absolutely no point in asking anybody what they think or feel if we're not going to do something with that information. But if we then act on that information, we will gain their trust. And then once again, we can go back and that cycle starts again when we can ask them the questions, we can listen, we can act on that information, and we gain trust. And that cycle just needs to continue. So I believe that, they are fundamentally the 3 steps to how to improve engagement. So
I would add that a little bit to what April's just said is, the value of having a very targeted measure of engagement, and April uses the 12 as well, and that's been effective at getting very focused on creating the right conditions for high performance. There are certain conditions that high-performing teams operate under, that no other team has, including absolute clarity of expectations is one example, and alignment to mission and purpose is another thing that when we study high-performing teams, we see very, very clearly, consistently over many decades. Average and poor-performing teams don't have anywhere near the clarity or the alignment to mission and purpose. So getting a very focused measure is important. And measuring the right things and cutting out the noise that we talked about before in these really long surveys that confuse managers. I'd say the second thing is, in terms of action, a lot of surveys focus on this sort of macro view of engagement. Say, okay, well, here's 3 or 4 things we need to do as a company to drive high engagement, and that's valid. But then it often gets into HR's hands and it says, okay, HR have got to do all these things over here to drive high engagement. Engagement's very local. It's driven by managers ultimately. And so my engagement is very different to a Gallup person in New York. We've got a different manager, a different environment, different team, different clients. So engagement's local. And so I think the number one thing that organizations need to do is to equip managers to be effective at managing and actually creating the conditions locally for high performance. And that's a skill set. That's about conversations. That's about meaningful conversations. A lot of managers are getting better at that, coaching style conversations, but we're still on the journey.
Yeah, education. Education.
Yeah, we've certainly found and Zip with our engagement surveys, and we've moved more to kind of shorter pulses. I see that there's people in here saying that sometimes people don't answer questions. Lots of different ways that you can listen, and we're being really deliberate about how we listen differently too. So it's not just engagement surveys that we're doing. We have team members that run stay interviews, which is instead of your exit interview, it's actually getting feedback from people on what we can do better when they're still there, which is awesome. And we also have champions throughout the business who can kind of collect feedback and then share that back to the people team, because we're never going to be in a position where there's a one-to-one relationship with people team members with people, because it just doesn't scale. And so similar to Alan's point, it does come down to your managers, and we're really doubling down in measuring manager performance. So we've got upward feedback on managers that's just happened. I had feedback this week, a lot of which is going to help me continue to grow and improve. But that's the only way that we're going to be able to scale engagement, is doubling down on building awesome leaders who can build their high performing teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually don't want to move away from this point too quickly, because there's quite a lot of stuff bubbling up in this chat around this. There was something, I'll just read it out if I may, and I don't mean to. What do you do? What do you do with very disengaged opinion leaders having an influence over others? It's quite an interesting one, because it's exceptionally prevalent, but it's also something that's very, very hard to systematically stop without engaging with people and having a conversation and listening to them. So talk to us about that, and talk to our audience about that from your experiences, guys. Over to you, April.
I think that's probably, to be honest, I think that's probably one of the hardest things that you can ever tackle. If you've got a highly disengaged leader who has a lot of influence and possibly even is doing quite well in the business, I think that is when it gets really, really difficult. And I've spoken a bit about this and thought about this. There are many, many examples in the history of my career where you have an excellent salesperson who is really, really good at making money that ultimately is affecting his bank balance, his maybe, or hers. I hate to say it, they're often men. An excellent salesperson who is incredibly toxic in the organisation and is affecting the engagement of everybody around them. Okay? But nobody wants to touch them, or nobody wants to go. So the rules don't apply to them. They are behaving in a way that would not be aligned to the values of the business. Yet they are allowed to continue to be there because they are bringing in a lot of money, and nobody wants to touch them because they have one great relationship with one very important client, and so forth. And I genuinely believe that is one of the hardest things to fix, that sometimes we need to take a short-term loss for a long-term gain. And I think ultimately, if you make those really difficult decisions about people like that, and you make it clear to everybody else in the organisation, and particularly the people around them, that we have not tolerated this because we know that their behaviour is not the way that is not living to our values and not what we expect from people, and you make difficult decisions to exit them, if you need to, out of that business, then you know it's probably the solution. If you,
what I would add to
that, you can do.
Yeah, what I'd add to that as well is meeting people where they're at. There's some people that are just believers and they get it, they get the people space, they realize how important it is, often from being in a team where that hasn't been, hasn't had awesome engagement. And there's others that don't get it and they don't see the importance of it. And so probably the best strategy or tactic to approach that is with data. No one can argue with data. A lot of your high performers as well understand data and metrics, and that's why any form of survey or qualitative, quantitative data is a valid point, which you can actually use to kind of show progress over time, or then link it back to often the teams with leaders that don't have great feedback are missing targets. Like that's a pretty clear one-to-one, or at least a correlation there. And data is kind of how we've had success as a people team here at Zip. We speak the same language as the business now.
Yeah, I think that's critical. Talking a common language isn't a jarring language to that's corporate, that's head office, that's them, this is us. And that's quite an important statement there, Jen. Alan, I can see you nodding on. I'm sure you've got lots of information and sound bites on this.
Look, I'll just add to what's been said there, that someone who's actively disengaged, that's our terminology for someone who's disconnected, disgruntled, behaves poorly. And, a lot of my clients say to me, look, when we present engagement data, I say, look, 8% of your employees are actively disengaged. And they said, look, can you tell us who they are? And, we'll solve that problem very quickly. And I say, well, I would never do that. And I don't get to see that sort of level of data anyway. It's confidential. But you don't need me to tell you who your actively disengaged employees are, because you work with them and they have a certain behavior about them. And if they're in a leadership role or very influential, that can be very difficult. And there's no easy solution. But I do think that someone who's actively disengaged in an organization deserves a chance to be understood and deserves a little bit of a chance to turn that around. Sometimes there's an individual that just doesn't belong in the organization, that no matter what you do for them, they will never be engaged in your work environment, and they ultimately need to go for their own benefit, for the benefit of the organization, for your customers, and everyone else around them. But there are some cases where you've got individuals who are lacking in something in terms of one of the human workplace needs, that if that could be addressed, then they shift in terms of their mindset, because it's just motivation, and our motivation does wane and it comes up and down. So as human beings coming to work, we're emotional. And so how do we create those positive emotions? So with someone who's actively disengaged, I think it's pretty easy to spot them. They need some conversation initially to understand what's causing the disengagement. And sometimes that can be addressed. It might be someone in the wrong role, or someone that's role needs adjustment, or they need some feedback on what's expected, or there's something that would address their engagement and can turn them around. But very often that person probably either needs to be held to account for their behavior and then needs to be moved on if they can't shift that behavior to meet expectations. Good companies are brave enough to move people on, even their high performers, that, if you think of the what and the how in a performance measure, the what is, the great salesperson who's smashing their sales results, but the how they get there is equally important. And engagement's one of those measures that you can introduce into the how. So that salesperson or that sales manager or whoever, when you look at their engagement scores, are terrible. So hang on, there's something wrong there. The impact they're having on the people around them is toxic. So that's equally important to their sales results. And we need to hold up the what and the how at equal measure.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to pick this one question up here on this point. I do want to, in the interest of time, keep moving. But Christian just put something. Do you think that businesses rely on quant data too much? And is there a disconnection between employee surveys and what employees really think and feel? It's interesting.
I can take that one if you like, Ian, just first. I think the answer is yes. Sometimes businesses do over-rely on the data, and I get clients, particularly data-savvy clients, wanting to go deeper and deeper into the data. They say, look, tell us the one thing, the silver bullet that's going to transform our organisation into a moderately engaged organisation to a highly engaged organisation. I say, look, you've got enough data. What you need to do now is go and talk to people.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to do is shine a light on a few things that need a further conversation to be understood and then need to be followed through. Engagement is a contact sport, as I like to describe it. So it's about managers and people coming together to talk about the important things and then taking action. And so the survey in itself is useful, doing a pulse just to get a sense of where we're at, give us a little bit more granularity about where to focus. But ultimately, the thing that improves engagement is not measuring engagement, it's actually taking the action, having the conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess what I'd add to that is everyone sees the world and interprets the world a little bit differently. We're all different. We all operate in different contexts. And one of the things I love about working with software engineers, and we have a lot of software engineers here at Zip, is that they're very literal. And so when you read an engagement survey question, they can, for example, an ENPS, would you recommend this company or team? They might be like, I love my team and totally recommend my team, but I know that this tiny corner of the business, I wouldn't. So I'm going to rate it somewhere in the middle. And so there's always context that surrounds people's responses. And so I think that's probably the call out from my end. It's a data point, and data points are super useful, but it's one of many data points that then you would then use to build out that context.
One of the sayings we have at Gallup is it's not just about raising the numbers, it's about what the numbers raise. So again, it's not just about what about raising the numbers in a survey and getting high scores in an employee engagement survey, patting ourselves on the back. It's about what the numbers raise. It's the issues that maybe employees wouldn't voice without the survey. And then that's the opportunity for the organisation and for managers to sit down with a team and have a conversation about the things that are enabling performance for the team and things that are getting in the way of performance. And so it's the vehicle for the conversation, actually, the data. It's not the be all and end all.
Interesting. I'm just conscious of time, guys, because we could talk for hours on this particular piece. I'll just move forward. Again, for those of you that are joined later, at each of these segments, as we pass through, there'll be a few different data points that will be downloadable and shared with all of you just for your takeaway purposes. So I'll just move on very, very quickly to the next stage, which is linked in many ways, accidentally on purpose, which is how is it that you can actually help employees thrive? I love the context and this notion that engagement is a contact sport. I think I'm going to steal that, but it really is. So if it's a contact sport, then how do we actually make sure that everybody's got everything they need to thrive? Let's talk about that. And April, I'll throw that to you and I'll pass down the line. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs as it relates to engagement. Over to you. What is it?
Sure. And we've actually had a couple of really good questions on the chat that relate to this as well. So it's no secret that we do work with Gallup, and the Q12 is something that you can really refer to in this situation. Jacomi asks the question, how are we supposed to be engaged? I'm summarising it, but when we have to work with software solutions, software that's 30 years old, and that is one of the most fundamental things. If we wanted to help our employees to thrive, go back to Maslow. Maslow in the context of engagement is they need to understand what's expected of them, and they need the tools and the equipment to be able to perform their jobs. And none of us could say that we've not ever sat in a room and been frustrated by the technology or the lighting or the lack of fresh air or view or light or whatever it might be, and we're incredibly frustrated by that kind of thing, because here we are putting in all the effort we possibly can, and the systems and the tools around us are letting us down, and that is absolutely something that impacts the way we feel, basically, which is our engagement. So to help our employees to thrive, I think there really are some basic things. We do need them to understand what's expected of them as well. I think that so often when teams break down, when teams are not working well, is because when there's no clarity of what is actually expected of people. People tend to hold on to things. They don't share data. There's more backstabbing. There's more complicated politics and so forth when people are not really clear about what is it that you need me to do, and then being recognised and rewarded adequately and fairly for those things that they're actually doing. And then on top of that, of course, higher up that Maslow tree, people want to be learning, they want to be growing, they want to be developing, and also they want to be doing things that is actually playing to their strengths. Take my example back to salespeople again. Salespeople love getting out there. They love talking to people. They love wheeling and dealing, meeting, greeting, and so forth. If you have those salespeople spending 70% of their time doing admin and forecasting and budgeting and proving what they did last month and filling out forms and so forth, they're not working to their strengths and will not thrive. You can't maintain a long-term positive, high engagement if you are not doing things that are actually playing to your strengths and that, and having that ability to learn and to grow and to so forth. So I think that, I love the concept of the Q12 for that. The other one is purpose, and we had a really good question on purpose come up on the chat.
From Pratik. Yeah.
How does purpose work? Look, I don't know if I'm a bit late to the party, but my husband and I are watching Homeland at the moment. I think we're in series 4, right? For those of you that don't watch as much Netflix as we do, basically they're CIA and they're running around. They work 24/7 according to the TV show, right? And I actually watch it finding myself thinking, this is an example of engagement. This is purpose in action here, right? These people, obviously we can extrapolate it to real life, but these people are actually, they feel they're saving America, right? That's what they feel like they're doing in this show. I know it's a show, guys, but ultimately it's the same thing. If you really believe in what you're doing, you don't care that you're up at 9 o'clock at night or that you're having to work 24/7 or whatever it might be. Obviously, I'm not suggesting we want everyone to work 24/7. We don't want people to be burning out, etc. Okay, but if you believe in what you're doing, if you understand how what you're doing as a cog in a huge wheel potentially is impacting the business, and that people recognize and care about you for the things that you are doing, then you want to be there and you want to keep going. So be really clear on what your purpose is as an organization. You can really help all of the people to get on board and to make a real effort to get there. Remember a really basic example many years ago that I heard. They interviewed the cleaner at NASA, and the cleaner at NASA was the person that turned up at 9 o'clock at night and cleaned all the toilets like there is in every organization. And they said to this cleaner, well, what's your purpose? And the cleaner said, I'm getting people to the moon, right? I'm part of the whole of NASA, and this is what we're doing as NASA, and I'm part of that because they all need clean toilets as well, So if you can ingrain that kind of purpose into your organization, I believe it's absolutely it's a long way to getting you there.
Yeah. Jen, thriving. How do you over at Zip help people thrive? What is it you're doing with the Zipsters?
Yeah, so it comes down to knowing people as humans, and one of our values is customer first. And so first thing is actually know your customers, and we like to operate. We like to think of ourselves as operating like a product team, our people team here at Zip. It's one of our customers. Let's listen to our customers. We're not going to build, ship, design anything that's not actually what they want. And so a big part of it's listening, iterating, creating an environment where they actually feel like they can give that feedback to us. But interesting, you talk about purpose. Our purpose statement is the freedom to own it. And a big part of that is how do we actually attract and then enable people just to have that accountability mindset, empowered to do their best work at Zip.
Yeah, wonderful. Simple, eloquent. But actually, as you say, know your people. It is. Yeah.
My one saying that I'll say to managers is, what does your team, how many siblings does your team member have, or what do they do outside of work? And if they can't tell me that, one, it's a fail. And then two, I ask the question back to them, would they know that about you? Because so much of it is you then being vulnerable and sharing parts around your life so that your team members do too. And that's how you build trust and get to know each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ian, one of the big drivers, I think, of helping people be more engaged and thrive is the ability of managers to have frequent, ongoing conversations with their people, with two dimensions to it. One is about their role and the tasks and everything else that's going on day to day. But the second element of it is about the person performing the task. So it's, if it's just about the tasks and the work in progress meetings and the catch ups are all about what's going on in the work, they start to feel quite transactional. So managers need to carve out time or make those conversations much more personal than they ever have before. And that's also the expectation of younger people coming into the workforce now. They want more ongoing conversations 100%. About them and about their development, their growth, about their performance and all these other things. So we need multi-dimensional conversations, and coach-like, rather than managing to task. And we have an interesting stat when we ask people in surveys, does your manager have regular conversations with you? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then those people are 3 times more likely to be engaged than if the answer is no. And we don't define how regular those conversations are. It depends on the individual, but they can't be, they've got to be more frequently than monthly. And it's very often the informal conversations that matter. Those what we call quick connects, those unscheduled conversations that happen spontaneously when people are co-located. But when we're virtual or managing remote teams, we need to be much more intentional as managers to have those conversations. And as April talked about, she was talking about the hierarchy of needs. Those conversations enable those needs to be met. So how do you get clarity? Well, clarity is through conversation, ongoing, continual conversations, links to purpose. That doesn't happen just by accident. That's a conversation that needs continual reinforcement. What's my role and my impact on the mission and purpose? And things like recognition, development. It's an ongoing conversation. So I would say the number one thing organizations can do, help people thrive, is to make sure those one-on-one conversations are happening about the right things, about the person and about their role.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for the audience and the listeners here, we've actually got a bit of a list and an overview and some data points in there that will really touch on some of that. One of the things that I like about this in particular, establish good leadership practices, but then trust your teams. Trust your teams. They're humans. We're all humans. We've all got a head and a heart. So you've got to engage both of them in equal measure. So I'll move on to another area, which is a personal favorite of mine, which is all about not forgetting about your employer brand. One of the things for me is that I engage with lots of different businesses on a frequent basis that from different industries and walks of life. And I find the more progressive organizations put this front and center because they're growing and competing for talent in different markets. And, they really do think about this, and it forms part of a very clearly articulated P&C or deliberate strategy with marketing as well as the people organizations. Bigger businesses, it's become much more of an afterthought, and it's almost been termed in this bucket of, it's that modern approach. Actually, no. I completely disagree with that. I take umbrage to that. It's not a modern approach. It's just repackaged. Your employer brand is an always-on strategy, and your EVP is kind of what brings that to life. So let's really talk about that. I'm going to pick on you, Jen, because with your experience, with the type of companies that you've been involved with, certainly over the last 10 years, I find it intriguing. You've got a consulting background and you've got some tech startups and scale-ups, and you're well known for it. And I find it interesting, the businesses that you've worked at and the types of industries that they're in, which is quite different, have all got something very, very common, which is a very, very strong and clearly articulated employer brand. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, so for me, employer brand comes down to authenticity. So much of it is what people are hearing and seeing outside and how that marries up when you're on the inside as well. So you can invest all the fancy marketing, wording, slogans, visuals, all that jazz. But if it doesn't actually marry up with what it's like on the inside, you're a fraud. And so a big part of it is taking what you're hearing internally from your listening. And there is an element of making some of that more aspirational too, around what your people want you to be and want you to grow into, and then translating that in a really authentic and natural way. So we like to think about it is how we treat our customers should be the same as how we treat our employees. So what you see and hear about Zip is actually what it's like inside Zip. And that's very much led from our founders and their authenticity right through people team and all our teams as well. And so a big part of what you'll see about Zip is it's fun, it's dynamic, it does swing relatively young because our customer base is quite young too, as is our employee base. But a big part of it is stories from people. So we take great things that Zipsters are doing and share that externally. And a big part of our employer brand is just showcasing our people. Like that's actually at the heart of it, because that's what we're all about. But keeping it real, keeping it human, keeping it authentic, and marrying up to how we treat our customers is how we think about EVP.
Yeah, absolutely. April, did you want to kind of elaborate on that?
I don't. I think Jen summed it up so well. I truly believe that the most fundamental part to EVP is ensuring that what you are saying that you do is actually the same as what you actually do, and I think the larger the company, sometimes that gets, a little bit more lost. If you think about maybe the big banks or the big consulting firms or whatever, they have beautiful marketing teams, they have huge amounts of HR people and so forth, and so that they can write all sorts of gorgeous things on a website, but then when you actually go to talk to people, ultimately what they will tell you about is their relationship with their manager and their colleagues, and so that's the part that you've actually got to get right. And if you get that right, and then you can talk about it and showcase it in a fantastic way, then you're doing really, really well from an EVP perspective. Yeah. And I guess I just want to add to that the perks thing, which I've that in a lot of areas. I even had a great chat to one of our clients a little while ago, and she was sort of talking about the concept of EVP, and I need to know what my budget is, and I need to know what we can do, and do you have any great ideas? And I said, well, of course, we can buy everybody lots of presents, and you can buy everybody this, and you can paint the office, and you can have free drinks every single day, and you can have free lunches, and you can have free this, and you can have free that, and so forth and so forth. I said, but what are you actually doing for the people that are not just perks? You know what I mean? The conversations that Alan's talking about that you're having, the development opportunities, the ability to listen, to feel appreciated, to feel valued, all of those things are so much more fundamental than all the perks. Now, if you have a few perks on top of that, absolutely write about them on your website, without a doubt, right? I mean, nobody ever says no to a free drink on a Friday afternoon, right? But people are not getting up at work on a Friday morning going, oh, I'm so excited to go to work today because I've got a free beer at 4:00.
Or maybe they are.
Well, maybe they are. But chances are they're more likely to jump out of bed on a Friday morning because they're really loving the project that they're doing, and they're really loving the work that they're doing. They're playing to their strengths, they're working to their strengths, and they've got good relationships with the people around them.
Absolutely. Alan, there's so much on this, isn't there? Let's kind of close this section out, and really listen to some of the data points on this.
Look, I think with the EVP, I say to clients, if you want to define or understand your EVP, get your high performers in a room and ask them two questions. Why did you join, and why do you stay? Mm-hmm. And that, in essence, gets to the heart of what the EVP is and what it should be. Because, what you want to do through an EVP is to attract and retain more like your high performers. So your poor performers, you probably don't want too many more of those, or even your average performers. Your high performers are the ones that drive your business forward. So why do they join and why do they stay? That, in essence, should describe nicely your employee value proposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. There's a whole range of different points here, guys, that, again, as part of the takeaway will be delivered over to you. I think it's really quite important that the audience and the people in participation listening to us today have got the opportunity to ensure that, in reality, how is it that you're able to take this back to your business and actually build your own internal narrative, why this stuff is actually important. What's great about your business. So tell people, you're learning about what make people thrive. So go and give them a bloody good listening to. There's some of the key fundamentals here about what the audience can do with some of these takeaways and insights from the panel today, that you're able to kind of take that and say, now let's measure ourselves against some of this. And I think that's really one of the key things that I'd like the audience and the people watching us today to be able to take away. So On that basis, we've got a couple of other slides which I was going to show with just more kind of global narrative, but just in the interest of time and also some of these questions, what I'd like to do is just go in. We've got about 8 minutes just to go back into a bit of a Q&A. So what I might do is stop sharing, or at least just go back to the title slide and actually just throw out there to the audience, if anybody's got a particular burning question about something that we've covered today. If not, I'll go back into the chat and I'll start to pick out on some of these just to finish our discussion. So just to open it up, there is a question that's related way further down in our discussion. Most companies, i.e. in the banks, focus on delivering exceptional digital experiences to customers, some of which are their own employees, yet persist with technical infrastructure and software solutions that are sometimes 30 years old, back to your point that you made before, April. And the employees that have to deal with that obviously have a bit of an issue with it, I would assume. So what is the impact on both employee productivity and retention? So if you think about that, and that's that thrive piece. We are continuing to do what we always did and expecting a different result, and we're not really investing in changing the things. Goes back to a comment you made before, Jen, about listen to your people and then enact the feedback. I'm using second-rate tools and/or technology to deliver a first-class customer experience. You know, how do we deal with that?
There's an element of, and certainly anything we do in the people space from a digital perspective needs to be to the same quality that our people are building for our customers. And Zip's whole model is around disrupting this clunky old bank vibe, and instead we're building delightful customer experiences. Where I think our NPS for our app is just insane. I think it's 4.9 out of 5 on the App Store or something crazy like that, and then the NPS is 60 plus, which I've never seen before. And a big part of that is because we listen to customers and build beautiful things for customers, and so we have to do the same thing for our people. Like if you're building clunky, crappy things, then what kind of experiences do you think that's encouraging your people to build for your customers? So really it comes down to listening to customers, and then maybe it is that you have to roll out your big clunky system, but then how do you do it in a way that is different? How are you experimenting with different types of learning? What is the kind of support that sits across that? How are managers almost gamifying it or making it fun, that even if you are using something that's clunky, you can actually build experiences around it that are a little bit magical for people. Yeah,
absolutely. Something that just come through to me is, you know, somebody's made a comment that this is their first webinar. I'm really appreciative of all of the commentary and so on. A lot of the information here is great. How do I now actually influence my CEO? Well, what do I do now?
Yeah, I have 3 things to say, and then I'll shut up and let everyone else speak. So the first one is, you've got to meet your stakeholders where they're at on their own people journey. You're going to have your believers, you're going to have people that don't get it. And so it's really tailoring your approach to your key stakeholders and your leaders. And the next one is data. And that's not just there can be market data from the Gallups and Talents of the world, or it could be your internal people data. And then 3, which is the magic wand, is just asking that you want to experiment with something. I want to do a pilot. Like, if you don't trust me now based on the data, let me experiment with this in this part of the business and prove to you the impact it can have. And then pick a highly engaged team or a leader that gets it and absolutely crush it. And then from there, it'll just go viral. And the reason why I say that is because that's my only approach in how I do anything. I find believers in the people space, get them to experiment with me. Often they build it, and then the rest of the business sees it and wants it.
Yeah, got to crack some eggs to make an omelette, right, Jen?
100%.
Exactly. April, what would your be? Can we add to this? Can we get this to a magic list of 9 rather than 3?
Oh, look, once again, I think Jen has nailed it, and data really is the absolute key. I mean, I have a really small example. When I first started at Talent, and I needed to, and you know, there was a lot of talk about what we needed. We need this, we need that, we need more learning development, we need more this, you know, and my response was, okay, well, why don't we ask the people properly what they really, really need? And we're going to do that through an engagement survey. And we ran the engagement survey, and, you know, I hadn't when you're brand new, you sort of get away with more things. There's less selling that you need to do in order to make things happen. And so we ran the survey, and I said, okay, so I just want to show you this is why we've done this, and take a look at these numbers. And I was actually able to show my CEO with amazing clarity the top performing teams in our business were also the most highly engaged.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those moments where you have one screen, not even a slide, we're in the data, and there it was. Here is the top performing teams, and they are the most highly engaged in our organisation, based on our survey that we ran through Gallup. And from then on, he was an absolute convert. He was like, oh, this stuff works, go for it. No. And therefore, from there on, the conversation was important. It was important to the business. The minute you can give them that kind of an example, you can actually show them the data, as Jen was saying. That's how you get them on board.
Yeah, I think the critical thing there is that, to Jen's point before, it's about the data that's out there. Yes, that's great, but actually the data from within the organisation, your example there is critical. Alan, finish us off. What have we got?
Yeah, April hit the nail on the head there. It's linking it to performance. So one of the challenges with the terminology engagement is that everyone uses it. There's a lot of different surveys and different ways of measuring it. So that's muddied the waters a little bit. Ultimately, at its essence is, engagement is all about creating the conditions for high performance. So the more that you can help senior leaders understand, that the work we're going to do around engagement is actually goes beyond just engaging, making people happy and satisfied at work, is actually creating the conditions where people can come to work and perform at their best, and making that link to high performance. And that's what really CEOs care about. They care about performance, and engagement is an enabler for high performance. So in some cases, I don't even use the terminology engagement. I start talking about high performance, and we use the Q12, and we talk about the conditions for high performance. How do we enable high performance in the organization? How do we do the things that matter? And that gets it away from an HR-led initiative around engagement, more around every leader owns performance in the business. Yeah. And so how do we do that? That's really how I'd finish up.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't really have time for any more questions. In totality, there is a quick one, I would assume, that talks to April, your example. April, were these high-performing teams engaged because of their leadership?
Leadership has a very, very, very big role to play. I think the stat out there, Alan can correct me if I'm wrong, but 70%. Okay, so yes, leadership is really, really important, which what Jen was saying earlier. What we're enabling our people, our managers, to be the best leaders that they possibly can be, because that is going to get us the best result when it comes to high performance. So I think I'm going to stop talking, and thanks for that, Alan. I think I'm going to stop talking about engagement altogether and just talk about conditions for high performance. I absolutely love that.
And it's a contact sport. And Jen, I'm going to finish on you. Your top three, the magic wands, if you will, which are: how do I influence my CEO? In recap, are data.
Oh, goodness. Meet them where they're at. So who they are as a human. Data, and pilot or offer to run an experiment with your believers.
Absolutely. And that guides, I'm going to close it there. I'm going to thank everybody on the panel for your inputs, your insights, and your sense of humor and collaboration. I really, really appreciate it. For all of the audience that is still online with us, thank you very much. This will be recorded and sent out. There will be takeaways with downloadable content that will be shared as well. On behalf of all of us at Talent, I'd like to say a huge thank you, and have a fantastic afternoon or morning wherever you've joined us from in the world. Thanks ever so much, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye.
Bye.